The Phil Garris Show is only possible with listener support from you. Join us in our fight against the tyrant in the White House and restore America. With a small donation, you will receive a pocket constitution. Go to radioforfreedom.com today.
Hello, and welcome to the Phil Garris Show, carried on the Radio for Freedom Network, and I hope you're having a good day. Today we're going to talk about what happened to a police chief of Greenville, North Carolina, when he was returning home from Paris. As you can tell by the way I said North Carolina, I have a slight southern accent myself. My father was born in this area, and I've spent a lot of time in the Greenville, Pitt County area, and I have a true love for this area, and I have a love for the people. But there's something wrong when a police chief of Greenville, North Carolina, is detained at JFK Airport for an hour and a half after he's told federal authorities that he is a police chief, and they know he's a police chief. But nonetheless, they still detain him. What bothers me a lot about this story is this story was picked up in all the major media. The Washington Post carried 2 stories on this. CNN carried it. WLS, as we know who WLS is. WLS is like an ancient radio station out of Chicago. San Francisco Chronicle picked it up. In fact, the Daily Mail out of the UK, out of England, picked it up. It went out over the AP wire. The New York Times picked up the story. But when you start looking around North Carolina, the story barely got mentioned. The local media outlet in the Greenville area, one of the largest, is WITN. I listen to WITN. I go on the internet and look at it. I watch it on TV. And I went on WITN's website, and there was only one little story. There was 2 little stories about this police chief, Hassan Aden. And the stories both start out saying allegedly he was detained. Well, that's not what the Washington Post says. That's not what CNN says. That's not what WLS says. That's not what the San Francisco Chronicle says. That's not what AP says. That's not what the Daily Mail says. And that's not what the New York Times says. They say he was detained for an hour and a half. In fact, the Washington Post goes a little bit farther and says that he was detained because of his name. And I believe that. But what I'm wondering is why the story wasn't picked up hardly at all in North Carolina. Was it because of his name? I don't know. Well, what had happened, Hassan, who was an Italian-born immigrant, he was born to an Italian mother and a Somali father. He's lived in the United States for 42 years. He was the police chief. He's retired now, but he was a police chief for Greenville, North Carolina, a man that would risk his life for the citizens of Eastern North Carolina and served Eastern North Carolina as their police chief. Here's a quote by Hassan, what he says, quote, "This experience has left me feeling vulnerable and unsure about the future of a country that was once great and that I proudly call my own." That's what he wrote in his Facebook post describing his detention by federal authorities at JFK. The Washington Post says that a spokeswoman for the U.S. Customs and Border Protection denied that officers engaged in profiling. Well, I think they did. I think this is a really sad story. If federal authorities, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, can detain a retired police chief of a large city, Greenville, North Carolina, do you think any of us are safe? What happened to the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution? I hope the people of North Carolina pay attention to this story, and more importantly, think about what happened to their police chief, why he was detained, because this is a violation of the Fourth Amendment, and if they can detain a police chief, none of us are safe. I would like to thank all of our listeners and people that have contributed to this radio show. I would also like to thank littlefielddomains.com If you're in the need of any web products, domain names, websites, or anything, go to Littlefield Domains. They have 24/7 support, and you can call them anytime, and they will help you out and get you online fast and quick, and their products are absolutely wonderful.